Hello, my name is Mr. Chipman. I teach biology and AP biology at Murray High School in Murray, Kentucky, and this is Unit 1 of AP Biology, the chemistry of life. We're looking at 1.1, structure of water and hydrogen bonding. Nice long section name, very descriptive of what we're getting ready to talk about. Here's the water molecule. We're getting ready to talk about a water molecule. Let's talk about it then. Polarity. Very important concept. We think of polarity, think of things like poles, right, having opposite ends. Very similar to this. When I think of polarity, well, first of all, what is polarity? It's the unequal sharing of electrons. Very important to kind of get that definition grounded in you, because this is a difficult concept, or can be. And so as long as you kind of anchor unequal sharing of electrons, that's helpful. All right, because now we're going to talk about the polarity of water. How does water unequally share electrons? Well, water is one oxygen atom, two hydrogen atoms. And the oxygen atom is a lot bigger than the hydrogen atom, right? And so I like to think of this as like, going on a family trip and have 3 kids, and you pass the, they're older now, but this probably would still happen. You pass the bag of gummy worms to the back seat. There is not an equal sharing of gummy worms going on, right? There's an unequal sharing of gummy worms going on. And it's because, well, not everyone has the same sort of pull, right? And so it's the same thing with electrons. So a couple things first. Oxygen, or water, is a covalently bonded molecule, right? In that the oxygen and the 2 hydrogens share their electrons. You've probably learned about covalent bonds before. And because they share their electrons, in theory, everything would be nice and equal, and all the electrons would kind of be going and spinning around, right? Oxygen has 8 protons, so it has 8 electrons, and each hydrogen has 1 proton each, so 1 electron each, so that's a 10 total, right? 1, 1, and 8, so 10 total electrons. And what ends up happening, because oxygen is so much bigger, and oxygen has so much more electronegativity is the word, but it's just so much more attraction of these electrons. It ends up holding the electrons more often than the hydrogens do. Even though they're sharing them, there still ends up having more of them. It's an unequal sharing. And because of this, the oxygen end of this atom ends up having a slightly negative charge because electrons are negative. The opposite end, the 2 hydrogen ends of this atom, end up having a slightly positive charge. Well, what happens when oxygen of one water molecule is attracted to the hydrogen of another water molecule? Well, the positive, it's slightly positive, the hydrogen, slightly negative oxygen, they're going to be attracted to each other. There's no physical bond. It's not, this oxygen here in this water and this hydrogen, they're sharing electrons. That's a physical bond. The attraction here is not a physical bond, but it's still called a bond. It's called a hydrogen bond. A hydrogen bond is an attraction between 2 covalently bonded polar molecules, right? And so it's a sort of very important bond in living things. And because of these hydrogen bonds that form in water, and in fact, a single water molecule can form 4 hydrogen bonds with other water molecules, as you can see in this picture. Because of this characteristic of water, water does a lot of things that other types of molecules don't really do. So we're going to get into some of water's properties. First of those properties are called cohesion and adhesion. Cohesion is the concept of water wants to stick to itself, which we saw here, right? Water likes to stick to itself. Why? It's because of those hydrogen bonds. Water is very attracted to itself, and that's cohesion. Well, water is also attracted to other polar things, right? And so water is not the only thing that's polar. There's other things that are polar, and water is attracted to those things, and that's called adhesion. Well, you see here in these little tubes, water has a tendency to climb up these tiny tubes. Now, I know you're thinking that's a weird thing to name. I don't have a separate slide for it. It's a weird thing to name, right? Is the ability to travel up tiny tubes. Well, it does that. It's called capillary action. Why does it do that? Well, if the tube is made out of glass, for instance, water really likes glass, so it grabs a hold of the glass, right? and it really likes itself, so it's grabbing a hold of itself, kind of like what you see in this picture, and it's pulling itself up the tube, right? This has some important applications for living things. Plants, we use that to carry water up to the length of the plant for some tall trees. It's very important. You've seen it probably in like a doctor's office if they've ever taken a little glass tube and like get the blood, up in the tube, because blood's mostly made out of water. Two very important biological properties of water: cohesion, adhesion. Next is surface tension. Surface tension is the resistance of water to an external force. What does that even mean? Let's look at this picture. So, and I think this bubble is actually a little bit better. There's a car surface apparently. So you wax your car. Wax is non-polar. It's highly non-polar, so water doesn't like it. And it likes itself more than it likes the wax, obviously. So it kind of bonds to itself and it forms this little bubble. Well, the attractions of these bonds to each other strengthen as they're being pressed on by the outside. It's like when you played Red Rover as a kid, and the kid ran on over and they tried to break your arms. And it's at that moment of, kid is breaking through my arms, you grab a hold of the person that you're hanging on to, right? There's that tension. It's a resistance when it meets an external force. And this surface tension allows for some interesting things. Some organisms are able to walk on water using this surface tension. It also can lead to some scary things. If you're a really small organism, you can actually get caught in a drop of water, which is kind of crazy. One interesting thing about it is water, can clean and is good at doing that sort of thing, of rinsing or cleansing. Soap actually causes the surface tension of water to dissipate and allows water to work better. So when you put soap or detergent in your clothes, it's actually allowing water to penetrate them more deeply and work better because it decreases the surface tension. There you go. Thanks, soap. I almost said specificity. Specificity is a nice word. High specific heat of capacity. What does this mean? So water holds a lot of heat. Why does it do that? Well, one water molecule can form 4 hydrogen bonds with other molecules. It takes a lot of energy to separate those bonds, and so that stores all that energy, right? So water is able to store quite a bit of energy before those bonds begin to break. And it takes a while for it to heat up. Have you ever tried to boil a pot of water to make your mac and cheese or ramen or whatever you're making? You've had to watch it. It's like, is this ever going to boil? Well, it takes a while for all that water to get so warm that it will release, right, and kind of turn into steam and go off on its merry way, right? So high specific heat. What does this have to do anything? Well, this is good because the ocean holds a lot of water, right? And it heats up really hot over the course of the day, the world flips over, and all that energy that was stored up in the water will actually release into the atmosphere and keep the earth temperate, which is kind of nice. High heat of vaporization. This is also an important thing. It requires a lot of energy for water to evaporate. And what this allows us to do is if we can get rid of the water that's in us, we can actually cool off, right? And the water evaporates off our skin, and it allows us to cool off, very closely tied with heat capacity as well, just because of this idea that water requires a lot of energy to evaporate, to go from liquid to vapor, and thus when it evaporates, it causes this kind of cooling sensation. What about freezing? Well, when water freezes, it does something a little bit different. So think about water, right? It's kind of moving around, right? It's kind of moving around. And these water molecules like one another, but because the water's warm, they're moving around quickly. But as the water gets cool, they're moving around more and more slowly. And so what ends up happening is because of the interactions between the hydrogens and the oxygens of different water molecules, those bonds will kind of like set into place, right? And when they do, it actually, because the oxygens don't want to be next to each other and the hydrogens and all that stuff, they all want to kind of separate, it actually causes water to expand when it freezes, right? And so if it expands, we think of density, right? Mass over volume. If it expands, it increases in space, takes up more space, the volume gets bigger, the mass stays the same, it's still the same amount of water, right? And so the denominator gets bigger, the number gets smaller. Density actually decreases. And so if density of water decreases when it freezes, what does that do? Well, it causes ice to float. This is pretty important if you're a living thing and living down here in the cold water. If ice sank, then the lake would eventually fill up with ice and everyone would be frozen. Because it doesn't, the surface freezes and everything underneath is able to live, which is good if you live under the water. Water's a universal solvent. How does this work? Water is able to break down most things because it pulls it apart. Here's a salt molecule, sodium chloride. Well, it was a salt molecule. Water pulled it apart because the hydrogens are really attracted to the negative chlorine, and the oxygens are really attracted to the positive chlorine or sodium, and it sort of pulls it apart, right, bit by bit. This is why salt dissolves in water. This is why olive oil does not dissolve in water, because there's nothing to grab a hold of. It doesn't pull it apart. Water can usually dissolve most things using this sort of thing, universal solvent. And we talked about this a little bit, right? But I think it's important to this idea of thermal regulation. I think it's really important to understand that our bodies are 70% water, and so if you need to cool down, the quickest way to do that is to get rid of water, right? Water stores a lot of energy, you get rid of it. So it's not just the vaporization of water that cools you, but getting rid of water cools you, right? And in the opposite way, having water, being hydrated is actually a way for water to kind of keep you warm, right? And so able to thermoregulate, different organisms do this differently, and so it's very important to understand as well. Another thing, transporting nutrients and waste. Water's doing this. How's it able to do that? Well, it can dissolve things. So a lot of things are dissolved in the water in our bodies and able to try to transport through our bodies, like sugar and different things. Hormones, maybe the hormones aren't dissolving, but they're traveling in the water. It allows things to travel through our systems as well. We mentioned plants earlier. Plants have these like tubes, tiny tubes, capillary action. They're called xylem. Those xylem water is allowed to travel up the length of the plant. It's being pulled through the roots or from the ground, through the roots, through the stem, out the leaves. So there's a whole process of that happening. Very important if you're a tree. Obviously, trees need water, and the whole tree needs water, not just the roots. And so very important for living things. And then lastly, looking at this idea of the cellular environment. The cellular environment is aqueous. It's a nice fun word for the day, aqueous. This allows biochemical reactions to occur. Hydrogen bonds form, stabilizing these molecules, and these interactions between things that love water and hate water or are afraid of water, hydrophobic, are very important for all living things. Let's look at a practice question. Water's unique properties are essential for life on Earth. A researcher is studying how water's hydrogen bonding affects its behavior in different conditions. A researcher observes water remains its liquid state at much wider ranges of temperatures compared to similarly sized molecules like methane. Which of the following properties of water best explains its ability to remain liquid over a wide range of temperatures? Take a few seconds. Pause the video, and then let's go look at the answer. Water has a high specific heat capacity, allowing it to absorb and release large amounts of energy with only small changes of temperature. Really like that answer. It's correct. It's not wrong. If it's not wrong, guess which ones are? All the other ones. We're not even going to read them. We're going to leave them alone. I have some little notes over here about this question if you want to check those out. Hopefully this was helpful. Be doing 1.2 very soon. Take a look.